What if the easiest thought your mind gives you is also the one that quietly steals your life? I have asked myself this question so many times that it has become a kind of background music, a low echo beneath every choice I postpone. It is strange how the mind works. It whispers comfort even when comfort becomes a cage, and it offers safety even when safety becomes a slow erosion of direction. I used to believe the lie because it felt gentle, because it never raised its voice, because it disguised itself as protection. And yet, every quiet day I lost to distraction, every hour spent waiting for the right moment, every plan postponed for a better mood left a small mark on me, almost invisible, but always accumulating. I started noticing how focus dissolves not like a sudden crash, but like mist thinning in the sun. How motivation fades when I wait for dopamine instead of movement. How attention breaks into pieces when I follow every impulse except the one that matters. I saw how laziness was not really laziness, but fear wearing soft clothes. Nietzsche would have called it a refusal to step into my own strength. William James would have called it the cost of letting habit shape me instead of the other way around. Both of them, in their own ways, fought against this inner lie, the belief that life can be lived later, when the feeling is right, when the mood cooperates, when the mind finally decides to behave. But learning doesn't work like that. Change doesn't work like that. And somewhere inside me, a quiet tension began to grow, the sense that the lie was no longer harmless, that it was guiding me more than my intentions were. I could feel a thin crack forming in my understanding of myself, as if the next step I took might expose something I had avoided for years. I didn't know what I would find. I only knew the lie was losing its sweetness, and the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. And in that growing silence, I felt a strange pull, as if my life was waiting for me to finally step into it. I sensed a door opening inside, not with force but with invitation, asking me to walk forward, even without certainty, even without comfort, to show what I had avoided seeing. Thank you for being here with me in this moment. If these words resonate, I'd be grateful if you gently subscribe or share your thoughts. It helps me keep creating stories that matter. I spent years believing the quiet promise my mind kept making, that I could act later, decide later, begin later. It felt harmless at first, like a soft place to rest. But one morning, as I sat with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands, I realized how much of my life had slipped into this silent waiting. The room was still, but inside me there was a slow ache, the sense that I had been postponing myself. I watched the light on the table, the dust drifting through it, and felt the weight of every unfinished intention pressing against my chest. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was simply honest. And honesty can feel heavier than fear. As I stared at the cup, I understood that the lie didn't protect me. It numbed me. It gave me comfort at the cost of direction. And the more I listened to it, the smaller my world became. Nietzsche appeared in my thoughts like a sharp wind, calling out the truth I didn't want to name, that my waiting was a refusal to step into my own force. William James followed with a gentler truth, that every small hesitation was becoming a habit, and every habit was shaping the person I was slowly becoming. Their voices, so different in tone, pressed against me in the same direction, toward movement, toward responsibility, toward the uncomfortable space where growth actually happens. I felt torn between the fire of one and the pragmatism of the other. Yet in that tension, something clearer emerged. The lie wasn't a flaw in me. It was a pattern, a repeated story I had mistaken for truth. As I sat there, I imagined my mind as a long hallway, dimly lit, stretching farther than I could see. Each moment of delay was like closing another door inside it. I realized I had been walking in the same small loop for years, mistaking familiarity for safety. The coffee cooled, the morning passed, and I remained frozen in that chair. But the image of the hallway stayed with me, insisting on a choice. Keep pacing the same few steps or take one small step into the unknown part of the corridor. Nothing dramatic, nothing heroic. just one honest step. Thank you for walking this part of the story with me. If this moment speaks to something in you, I'd be grateful if you gently subscribe or leave a thought. Your presence truly supports this journey. I woke the next day with a strange clarity, as if the hallway from the night before had followed me into the morning. I tried to begin my tasks with intention, but the old patterns pulled at me immediately. I reached for my phone without thinking, chasing tiny bursts of dopamine that felt like activity but delivered nothing. Each swipe felt harmless, yet each one pulled me away from myself. I watched my attention scatter in small pieces, drifting toward anything that kept me from starting the one thing I knew mattered. It was almost beautiful in its softness, this machinery of avoidance. It didn't fight me. It guided me gently, like a familiar current, and I let myself float because floating felt easier than choosing direction. I stepped into the kitchen and noticed how often I rearranged objects to avoid beginning real work. A pen shifted here, a notebook aligned there, as if order could substitute for action. The lie changed shape again. You need the right mood first. It sounded reasonable. It always did. But inside the simplicity of that thought lived the same old trap. Nietzsche's presence pressed into the moment with sharp honesty, reminding me that waiting for perfect feeling was the slowest form of surrender. William James stood beside that truth, showing me how my habits had become an invisible script running my days. Their tension didn't overwhelm me. It illuminated me. It made the pattern visible. As I stood by the counter, I pictured myself inside that hallway again. This time, the doors looked different. Some of them were warm with golden light, offering easy distractions. Others were gray and quiet, leading to tasks I feared would expose my imperfections. I realized how often I chose the glowing doors simply because they greeted me without resistance. But the real path, the one that mattered, waited in the dimmer spaces. I took a breath and felt the weight of that choice settling into my chest. I knew I was standing at another threshold, small but real, and that choosing even the smallest meaningful action would shift the hallway around me. In that quiet moment, I felt a courage rising, asking me to trust motion more than mood and presence more than fear. Thank you for being here. If this part of the story resonates, I'd be grateful if you gently subscribe or share a reflection. That evening, something inside me finally cracked open. I was sitting at my desk with a half-finished note in front of me, the kind of note I had rewritten so many times it had become a mirror of my hesitation. The room was quiet, and for the first time I could hear the subtle weight of my own avoidance. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was a soft truth curling around me. The lie I kept believing was not delaying my life, it was narrating it. Every time I said later, I wasn't just postponing a task, I was shaping the kind of person I was becoming. I felt that realization like a hand pressing gently against my chest, not hurting me, but insisting that I stop pretending not to understand. Nietzsche's presence entered the moment like a blunt edge, cutting through my old rationalizations. He didn't need to speak. The force of his philosophy pushed me toward honesty. He demanded that I stop treating my potential like a fragile thing. William James stood on the other side, quieter but firm, reminding me that identity does not come from intentions but from action, small, repeated, imperfect action. I felt trapped between those two truths, as if each one asked me to step forward while the old lie begged me to stay still. It became clear that I couldn't choose both. I looked down at my feet, and in my mind, saw a chain resting on the floor beside me. I had lived for years believing it was wrapped around my ankle, believing it explained my hesitation, my delay, my stillness. But when I imagined touching it, I saw the truth. It wasn't attached to anything. It had never been. All the weight I felt came from the story I had told myself, not from the world. I leaned back in my chair and felt a mix of grief and relief. Grief for the years spent waiting. Relief for the possibility that the next moment could be different. Not because I would become someone else overnight, but because I finally understood that movement was not denied to me. I had simply not chosen it. Thank you for staying with me through this turning point. If this part of the story touches something in you, I'd be grateful if you gently subscribe or leave a small reflection below. Your presence truly supports this journey. I woke the next morning knowing something had to break. Not dramatically, not violently, but honestly. I had lived so long inside the soft comfort of postponement that even the smallest action felt like stepping into cold water. Still, I chose one thing I had been avoiding for weeks. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't beautiful. It was clumsy, awkward, almost embarrassing, but it was real. And the moment I did it, I felt the lie lose a little of its power. I felt the air shift, as if the room had been holding its breath and finally exhaled with me. It struck me that the first step never looks heroic from the inside. It looks almost too small to matter, and yet it changes everything. Nietzsche's force moved through me like a spark, reminding me that self-overcoming starts in moments exactly like this. Ordinary, shaky, unpolished. William James appeared like a calm guide, showing me that action does not need beauty, it needs repetition. Together, without ever speaking, they shaped the scene around me. Their energy didn't lift me up, it grounded me. It made the moment feel serious in a way I had avoided for too long. As I stood there, breathing through the discomfort, the hallway in my mind returned. This time, it felt different. Each step I took brightened a small section ahead of me, as if movement itself was turning on the lights. And when I stopped, I felt the space dim again. It became clear. The hallway didn't shrink because life was against me. It shrank because I stopped walking. I bent down, touched the floor, and felt the meaning of that gesture. This was my ground, my life, my responsibility. I whispered the fear I carried, giving it a name so it couldn't hide anymore. I chose one direction, not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. And in that moment, the 4 techniques revealed themselves like simple truths inside a simple story. Light the hallway by moving, touch the ground to return to presence, name the fear so it loses its disguise, choose the next step, not the whole path. Nothing magical happened, but something honest did. And sometimes honesty is the first form of freedom. Thank you for walking through this part with me. If this moment resonates, I'd be grateful if you gently subscribe or share a quiet thought. Your presence truly supports this journey. I stepped outside the next morning before the sun had fully risen, carrying the quiet weight of everything I had learned. The air was cool, almost sharp, and it made me feel awake in a way motivation never had. I stood there for a moment, letting the world be still around me, and realized something simple. The shift I felt inside wasn't confidence, it wasn't clarity, it was willingness, a soft, steady willingness to move even when the lie whispered for me to wait. I finally understood that the mind's most seductive promise, later, was never about time. It was about escape. And I didn't want to escape my own life anymore. Walking down the street, I felt Nietzsche's fire in the way the morning light hit the pavement. It reminded me that life is not built through comfort, but through the courage to step into uncertainty. William James walked with me too, quietly, reminding me that identity grows through small, repeated acts, the ones no one sees but that slowly build the person I become. Their energies blended inside me, not as a conflict now, but as a guidance system. Intensity and practicality, passion and habit, vision and action. I felt them shaping me from the inside, not through force but through understanding. As I moved, I imagined the hallway again, now stretching into the open air. With every step I took, new parts of the path revealed themselves, as if movement itself painted the world in front of me. I realized that waiting for the path to appear before walking had been the lie all along. Life is not a map you study. It is a road you discover by stepping onto it. The world does not unfold for those who wait. It unfolds for those who walk. I felt a quiet ache for all the days I had lost to hesitation, but also a gentle gratitude for the moment I was now standing in. This was the emotional climax, the turning of the inner tide. I wasn't healed. I wasn't transformed. I was simply awake. And sometimes that is enough to begin again. As the sun rose higher, I felt the truth settle into me. My life will not change because I think differently. It will change because I move differently. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. If this closing wave touched you, I'd be grateful if you gently subscribe, like, or share a quiet reflection. Your presence helps me continue creating stories with depth and honesty.